To test his ex-wife's loyalty, the billionaire disguised himself as a homeless man, but her sharp eyes and unwavering heart saw right through the act. Sometimes love recognizes what money can't hide. The opulent Manhattan skyline gleamed like a sea of diamonds as Marcus Allister gazed out of the floor-to-ceiling window of his penthouse. The billionaire entrepreneur had everything anyone could dream of: wealth, influence, and a luxurious lifestyle that others could only fantasize about. Yet, as he swirled the amber liquid in his crystal tumbler, a deep void gnawed at his heart. His divorce from Claire had been finalized 2 years ago. At the time, he had convinced himself it was for the best. After all, what could a self-made billionaire have in common with a woman who worked as a community counselor in a struggling neighborhood? Their worlds had been too different, their lives too mismatched, or so he'd thought. But lately the doubts had returned, circling his mind like vultures. "Did she really betray me?" Marcus muttered, running a hand through his jet-black hair. His best friend and confidant, Julian Carter, sat on the leather couch across the room, watching him with a raised eyebrow. "Still thinking about Claire?" Julian asked, sipping his whiskey. Marcus's jaw tightened. "I need to know the truth. I can't keep wondering if I made a mistake." Julian set his glass down. "Marcus, we've been over this. You ended things because you thought she was after your money, and she walked away without a fight. What else do you need to know?" "That's just it," Marcus said, pacing the room. "She didn't take anything. No alimony, no settlement. She left with nothing but the clothes on her back. Doesn't that strike you as odd?" Julian shrugged. "Maybe she was playing the long game. Who knows what people are capable of when it comes to money?" Marcus stopped and stared at his friend. "I don't believe that. Claire was different. She wasn't like the others, but I need to know for sure." Julian leaned back, intrigued. "And how exactly are you planning to do that?" Marcus's lips curled into a faint, almost mischievous smile. "I'm going to test her." "Test her?" Julian echoed, his voice laced with skepticism. "Yes," Marcus said firmly. "I'll disguise myself as someone she'd never recognize, someone she wouldn't gain anything from helping. If she's still the woman I fell in love with, I'll know. And if she isn't, well, then I can finally let her go." Julian chuckled, shaking his head. "Only you would come up with something this insane. But I have to admit, I'm curious to see how this plays out." Marcus's plan was ambitious, risky even, but he was determined. The following week he transformed his appearance beyond recognition. Gone were the tailored suits and polished shoes. In their place were tattered clothes, unkempt hair, and a scruffy beard. With the help of a professional makeup artist, he added subtle prosthetics to alter the shape of his face, making him look older and worn. The man staring back at him in the mirror looked nothing like Marcus Allister, the billionaire CEO. Instead, he resembled a homeless man who had seen the harshest side of life. "Are you sure about this?" Julian asked as Marcus finished the final touches. Marcus nodded. "I have to be." With his disguise complete, Marcus set out to find Claire. He knew exactly where she would be. She hadn't changed jobs since their divorce. She was still working at the same community center, helping those in need. As Marcus approached the center, his heart pounded in his chest. He spotted her through the large glass windows, her figure as graceful and confident as ever. Claire was seated at a desk, speaking to a young mother who clutched a baby to her chest. Her soft voice and warm smile were just as he remembered, and for a moment, he felt a pang of regret. But this wasn't the time for nostalgia. This was his chance to uncover the truth. Taking a deep breath, Marcus stepped inside, the bell above the door jingling softly. Claire looked up, her eyes meeting his. There was no recognition in her gaze, just the professional courtesy she extended to everyone who walked through those doors. "Hello," she said warmly. "How can I help you today?" Marcus hesitated for a moment, then adopted a gravelly voice to match his appearance. I need some help. I don't have anywhere to go." Claire's expression softened with empathy. "Of course. Let's see what we can do for you." As she began asking him questions about his situation, Marcus couldn't help but notice the genuine concern in her eyes. She wasn't doing this out of obligation. She truly cared. "Is there anyone you can stay with, family or friends?" Claire asked. Marcus shook his head. "No one." Claire nodded thoughtfully. "All right. We'll start by finding you a temporary shelter, and then we'll work on something more permanent." As she spoke, Marcus felt a surge of emotions he hadn't anticipated. Seeing Claire in her element, helping others selflessly, reminded him of why he had fallen in love with her in the first place. But just as he thought he had gone unnoticed, Claire's eyes flickered with a spark of recognition. "Wait," she said, her gaze narrowing slightly. "Have we met before?" Marcus's heart skipped a beat. Had she seen through his disguise already? "No," he said quickly, lowering his gaze. "I don't think so." Claire studied him for a moment longer, then gave a small smile. "You remind me of someone, that's all." Marcus let out a silent sigh of relief. He had underestimated Claire's intuition, but for now, his secret was safe. As she continued to assist him, Marcus couldn't help but wonder, was she playing along? Or did she truly not recognize him? Little did he know the truth was far more complicated than he could have imagined. Claire watched the man in front of her with a mixture of curiosity and unease. There was something about him, something familiar, but she couldn't quite place it. His rough appearance and cautious demeanor matched the many individuals she had helped over the years. Yet his eyes, they struck a chord deep within her. As the man sat on the chair opposite her desk, shifting uncomfortably, she decided to focus on her work rather than her instincts. "Let's get you registered for a temporary shelter," she said, her tone professional yet kind. He nodded silently, his hands fidgeting with the frayed hem of his jacket. Claire pulled out a clipboard and began filling out the necessary paperwork, occasionally glancing up at him. "What's your name?" she asked. "Mark," he replied, his voice low and hesitant. "And your last name?" "Just Mark," he said quickly, avoiding her gaze. Claire raised an eyebrow but didn't press further. It wasn't unusual for people in his position to withhold personal information. Trust often came slowly to those who had experienced hardship. "Okay, Mark. Do you have any medical conditions or allergies we should know about?" she continued. "No," he mumbled, his eyes darting around the room. As she filled out the form, her mind wandered. There was something about his posture, the way he spoke. It reminded her of someone she hadn't seen in years. Someone who had once been her entire world before their marriage had crumbled into pieces. She shook her head, pushing the thought aside. Marcus was the last person she wanted to think about, especially while trying to help a man in need. Yet, the resemblance gnawed at her. "Mark," she said softly, trying to put him at ease. "I can see you're nervous, but I promise you're safe here. We're just trying to help." He looked up then, and for a fleeting moment Claire thought she saw a flicker of something in his eyes, an emotion she couldn't quite identify. Was it fear? Guilt? "Thank you," he said after a pause. I appreciate it." The words were sincere, yet they carried an undercurrent of something unsaid. Claire felt her heart tighten. She had spent years learning to read people, and Mark's guarded demeanor spoke volumes. Once the paperwork was complete, she handed him a card with the address of a nearby shelter. "This place has open beds tonight. Tell them I sent you, and they'll take care of the rest." Mark nodded, taking the card with trembling fingers. "Thank you," he said again, his voice barely above a whisper. As he stood to leave, Claire found herself compelled to say more. "Mark!" she called out, stopping him in his tracks. He turned, his expression wary. "If you ever need to talk, or if there's anything else you need, you can always come back here. We're here to help, no matter what." For a moment he seemed taken aback. Then, to her surprise, he gave a faint smile, one that tugged at something deep within her. "I'll keep that in mind," he said before walking out the door. As soon as he was gone, Claire leaned back in her chair, her mind racing. Who was he really, and why did he feel so familiar? Later that evening, as she closed up the community center, the day's events replayed in her mind. Mark's demeanor, his hesitation, the way he avoided her questions, it all felt calculated, almost rehearsed. "Am I overthinking this?" she muttered to herself as she locked the door. But the nagging feeling wouldn't go away. It wasn't just that Mark reminded her of Marcus. It was the way he had looked at her, as if he knew her. Claire shook her head, dismissing the thought. Marcus was a billionaire, a man who lived in a world far removed from hers. Why would he disguise himself as a homeless man and come to her? The idea was absurd. And yet, the next day, Mark returned. Claire was surprised to see him walk through the door, this time carrying a small bundle of papers. He hesitated near the entrance, looking unsure of himself, before approaching her desk. I wanted to say thank you for yesterday," he said awkwardly. Claire smiled. "You're welcome. Were you able to get a bed at the shelter?" "Yes, I did," he replied, his voice soft. "They were kind." "That's good to hear," she said. "Is there something else I can help you with?" Mark hesitated, then held out the papers. "They said I need to fill these out for long-term housing, but I don't really know how to do it." Claire took the papers from him and glanced through them. "These can be tricky," she said. "Why don't we go through them together?" As they worked on the forms, Claire couldn't shake the feeling that Mark was studying her just as much as she was studying him. His questions seemed genuine, but his eyes held a depth that hinted at something more. "You're very kind," he said suddenly, breaking the silence. Claire looked up, startled. "What do you mean?" "You don't have to do all this," he said, gesturing to the forms. "But you're helping me anyway." "It's my job," she replied with a shrug. "No," he said firmly. "It's more than that. You care. Not everyone does." Claire felt a lump form in her throat. She wasn't used to receiving compliments, especially from someone like Mark. "Everyone deserves kindness," she said softly. Mark's gaze lingered on her for a moment before he looked away. "Not everyone believes that," he murmured. The vulnerability in his voice caught Claire off guard. She wanted to ask him more, to understand what had brought him to this point, but something told her he wasn't ready to share. As the days passed, Mark continued to visit the community center, each time revealing a little more about himself. Claire listened patiently, offering advice and support where she could. But the more she got to know him, the stronger her suspicion grew. Mark was hiding something. She was sure of it. And one day, she decided to find out what. What Claire didn't know was that her decision would set off a chain of events that neither she nor Mark could have anticipated. Claire's curiosity grew stronger with each passing day. Mark's frequent visits and his guarded demeanor only fueled her suspicion that there was more to his story than he was letting on. She wasn't one to pry, but something about him felt too familiar to ignore. It was late one evening, after the community center had closed, when Claire finally decided to follow her instincts. She had noticed that Mark always left at the same time, heading in the same direction. Tonight, she would find out where he went. Pulling on her coat, she exited the building and trailed behind him at a safe distance. The streets were quiet, save for the occasional car passing by. Mark walked with purpose, his hunched posture disguising the confidence in his stride. Claire stayed back, careful not to draw his attention. After several blocks, Mark turned into an alleyway behind an upscale hotel. Claire's brows furrowed as she watched him pull out a keycard and slip through a side entrance. Her heart raced. What kind of homeless man had access to a luxury hotel? Determined to uncover the truth, Claire waited for a few moments before approaching the hotel. She stepped inside, her eyes scanning the lavish lobby. The chandeliers glittered above her, and the polished marble floors gleamed under the soft lights. It was a stark contrast to the man she thought she knew. Approaching the front desk, she put on her most confident smile. "Excuse me," she said. "I'm looking for a friend of mine who might be staying here. His name is Mark." The receptionist gave her a polite but skeptical look. "Do you have his last name or room number?" "No," Claire admitted, her confidence faltering. "But I know he's staying here. Could you check for me?" "I'm sorry, ma'am," the receptionist said. "We can't disclose guest information." Claire sighed, realizing she wouldn't get any answers this way. She stepped away from the desk and took a seat in the lobby, her mind racing. If Mark wasn't who he claimed to be, then who was he? Her thoughts were interrupted when she saw him step out of the elevator. Except, he didn't look like Mark anymore. The scruffy clothes and disheveled appearance were gone, replaced by a tailored suit and polished shoes. His hair was neatly combed, and he carried himself with an air of authority. Claire's breath caught in her throat. She knew that walk, that presence. It was Marcus. Before she could process what she was seeing, Marcus spotted her. His eyes widened in shock, and for a moment neither of them moved. Then he quickly strode over to her, his expression a mix of anger and panic. "Claire," he said in a low voice, his tone laced with frustration. "What are you doing here?" "I could ask you the same thing," she shot back, her voice trembling with a mix of confusion and anger. "You've been lying to me this whole time." Marcus sighed, running a hand through his hair. "It's not what you think." "Then explain it to me," she demanded, crossing her arms. "Why are you pretending to be someone you're not? And why come to me of all people?" Marcus glanced around the lobby, his expression wary. "Not here," he said. "Come with me." Claire hesitated, but her curiosity won out. She followed him to a private lounge off the main lobby. Once they were seated, Marcus leaned forward, his hands clasped together as he avoided her gaze. I owe you an explanation, he began. I wasn't honest with you because I needed to know something. Know what? Claire asked, her tone sharp. If you could manipulate me into helping you? If I'd fall for some sob story? No, Marcus said firmly, his eyes snapping to hers. That's not it at all. Then what is it? She pressed. Marcus took a deep breath, his expression softening. I wanted to know if you ever truly cared about me. Claire's eyes narrowed. Are you serious? You left me, Marcus. You ended our marriage, and now you want to test my loyalty? Do you have any idea how insulting that is? I know, he said quietly, and I'm sorry, but you have to understand. I didn't leave because I stopped loving you. Claire scoffed, shaking her head. You have a funny way of showing it. I left because I didn't feel worthy of you, he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. I let my insecurities and my pride get in the way, and when I realized my mistake, it was too late. Claire stared at him, her anger momentarily eclipsed by disbelief. You expect me to believe that? It's the truth, Marcus said, his gaze unwavering. And when I saw you again, I couldn't just come back into your life like nothing had happened. I had to know if you would still see the man I was, not the billionaire everyone else sees. Claire's heart ached at his words, but she couldn't ignore the hurt he had caused her. You didn't have to disguise yourself to find out, Marcus. You could have just talked to me. I didn't think you'd give me the chance, he admitted, and maybe I was afraid of what you'd say. Claire sighed, leaning back in her seat. I don't know what you were expecting, Marcus, but you don't get to walk back into my life and pretend everything's fine. You left me. You don't get to decide when it's convenient to come back. I know, he said softly, and I don't expect you to forgive me, but I had to try. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Claire's mind was a whirlwind of emotions, anger, sadness, and a flicker of the love she thought she had buried. Marcus, for his part, looked more vulnerable than she had ever seen him. Finally, Claire broke the silence. I don't know what you're trying to achieve, Marcus, but if you want me to believe you've changed, you're going to have to prove it. Marcus nodded, a determined look in his eyes. I will. Just give me the chance. Claire didn't respond, her heart torn between wanting to protect herself and the lingering hope that he could be the man she had once loved. As she left the hotel that night, she couldn't shake the feeling that her life was about to change. Again. But whether it was for better or worse, only time would tell. Claire spent the night wrestling with her emotions, her thoughts a tangled mess of memories and questions. Marcus's confession had stirred something deep within her, resentment for the years of pain he had caused, but also the faintest flicker of the love they had once shared. As much as she wanted to close the chapter on him, she couldn't deny the unresolved feelings his reappearance had brought to the surface. The next morning, she walked into the community center, hoping to lose herself in work. But as soon as she stepped through the doors, her co-workers greeted her with a flurry of whispers and knowing glances. Claire, her friend Elena said, approaching with a sly smile. You didn't tell us you had a visitor waiting for you. A visitor? Claire frowned, her heart sinking with suspicion. Elena nodded toward the waiting area. Claire followed her gaze and froze. Marcus was there, sitting in one of the plastic chairs, looking out of place but strangely at ease. Gone was the homeless disguise. He was dressed casually, his appearance understated yet undeniably polished. He stood as soon as he saw her, his expression a mix of hope and nervousness. Claire, he began, his voice warm but cautious. I know I probably shouldn't be here, but I needed to talk to you. Claire sighed, glancing around at her co-workers who were shamelessly eavesdropping. Not here, she muttered, gesturing for him to follow her outside. Once they were outside and away from prying ears, Claire crossed her arms and fixed him with a pointed look. What are you doing here, Marcus? I wanted to apologize, he said earnestly, for everything, for lying, for testing you, for the way I left. And you think showing up at my workplace unannounced is the way to do that? Claire asked, her tone sharp. I didn't know where else to find you, he admitted, and I didn't want to wait. I need you to know that I'm serious about making things right. Claire shook her head, her frustration bubbling to the surface. You can't just waltz back into my life and expect me to forgive you, Marcus. Do you have any idea how much you hurt me? I do, he said softly, his gaze full of regret. And I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you if you'll let me. Claire's heart ached at the sincerity in his voice, but she refused to let herself be swayed so easily. Words are cheap, Marcus. Prove it. I will, he said, his tone firm. But I need you to give me the chance. Claire sighed, her resolve weakening against the weight of her emotions. Fine, she said finally, but don't think for a second that this means I trust you. Marcus nodded, a small smile tugging at the corners of his lips. That's more than I could have hoped for. Thank you, Claire. Don't thank me yet, she replied, her voice tinged with warning. This is just the beginning. Over the next few days, Marcus made good on his promise. He began volunteering at the community center, working alongside Claire to help those in need. His efforts didn't go unnoticed. His charm and dedication quickly won over the staff and patrons alike. But Claire remained guarded, unwilling to let her walls down completely. One afternoon, as they were sorting donations, Marcus turned to her with a thoughtful expression. Why did you keep doing this? He asked. Helping people, even when you had every reason to give up? Claire hesitated, surprised by the question. Because it's who I am, she said simply, and because I know what it's like to feel like no one's in your corner. Marcus nodded, his gaze filled with admiration. You're incredible, Claire. I don't think I ever told you that enough. She glanced at him, her heart softening despite herself. Flattery won't get you anywhere, she said, though her tone lacked its usual edge. It's not flattery, he said. It's the truth. As much as Claire wanted to resist, she couldn't deny that Marcus was changing. He was no longer the arrogant, self-absorbed man she had divorced. This Marcus was humble, genuine, and determined to make amends. But the wounds of the past still lingered, and she wasn't ready to let go of her pain just yet. One evening, as they were closing up the community center, Marcus stopped her at the door. Claire, he said, his voice tentative, there's something I need to tell you. What is it? She asked, her heart sinking at the serious look on his face. I never stopped loving you, he admitted, his gaze steady. Even after everything that happened, even after I let my pride and insecurities destroy what we had, I never stopped. Claire's breath caught in her throat, her emotions swirling in a chaotic storm. She had spent years trying to convince herself that she no longer cared for him, but hearing those words brought back feelings she thought she had buried. I don't know if I can do this, Marcus, she said, her voice trembling. I don't know if I can trust you again. I understand, he said softly, but I'm not going anywhere. I'll prove to you that I'm worth trusting again. As she walked away that night, Claire couldn't help but feel torn. She wanted to believe in Marcus, in the possibility of a second chance, but the fear of getting hurt again held her back. Only time would tell if he could truly earn her trust and her heart. The days following Marcus's confession were a whirlwind of emotions for Claire. She found herself torn between the memories of the love they once shared and the pain of his betrayal. Marcus's efforts to rebuild her trust were consistent and unwavering. Every small gesture, every kind word, and every action seemed aimed at proving his sincerity. But Claire couldn't help but question whether this change in him was permanent or merely a fleeting attempt to win her back. One morning, Claire was busy preparing a fundraiser event for the community center. The fundraiser was crucial for the center's operations, and she had been working tirelessly to ensure its success. Marcus, who had quickly become an integral part of the center's volunteer team, had been helping with logistics and promotion. His business acumen had already made a noticeable difference, but Claire was reluctant to give him too much credit. Do you really think people will show up? Claire asked Elena, as they arranged chairs in the main hall. They will, Marcus interjected, walking in with a stack of flyers. The community respects what you've built here, Claire, and I've made a few calls to some potential donors. They're interested. Claire raised an eyebrow, skeptical. Donors? Marcus nodded. Some old contacts, people who are eager to invest in meaningful causes. Meaningful causes or billionaires looking for tax write-offs? Claire quipped, her tone sharp. Marcus didn't flinch at her comment. Instead, he gave her a patient smile. Either way, the center benefits, right? Claire sighed, unwilling to admit that he had a point. She turned back to Elena, avoiding Marcus's gaze. Let's focus on making everything perfect for tonight. The fundraiser was set to start at 6 p.m., and by early evening, the hall was transformed into a vibrant space filled with lights, music, and an air of hope. Local businesses had donated food and decorations, and volunteers were stationed at various booths to promote the center's programs. As guests began to arrive, Claire felt a flicker of nervous excitement. True to his word, Marcus had invited several high-profile individuals, and their presence was impossible to ignore. Claire watched as he effortlessly mingled with them, his charm and charisma drawing people in. For a moment, she was reminded of the man she had fallen in love with, the confident, passionate man who had once made her feel like she was the center of his universe. "Claire," Marcus called, breaking her reverie. He approached her with an older man in a tailored suit. "I'd like you to meet Mr. Donovan. He's a philanthropist interested in funding community programs." Claire extended her hand, putting on her best professional smile. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mr. Donovan." "The pleasure is mine," Donovan replied warmly. "Marcus has been telling me about the incredible work you're doing here. I'd be happy to contribute." Claire's smile faltered slightly, surprised by the compliment. "Thank you. Every bit helps." As Donovan moved on to speak with another guest, Marcus stayed by her side. "You're doing amazing, Claire. This place is a reflection of your hard work." Claire glanced at him, her defenses momentarily down. "Why are you doing this, Marcus? Is it guilt?" "It's not guilt," he said softly. "It's admiration. I see now what I couldn't see before. You're extraordinary, Claire, and I was a fool to let you go." Before Claire could respond, Elena called her over to address an issue at the silent auction table. She left Marcus standing there, her mind a whirlwind of emotions. As the evening progressed, the fundraiser proved to be a resounding success. Donations poured in, and the guests were visibly moved by the testimonials shared by those who had benefited from the center's programs. By the end of the night, Claire was both exhausted and exhilarated. "Congratulations," Marcus said as he approached her. "You did it." "We did it," she corrected, surprising herself. "You helped." Marcus smiled, the warmth in his eyes making her heart ache. "That's progress." Claire shook her head, suppressing a small smile. "Don't get ahead of yourself." As the guests began to leave and the volunteers started cleaning up, Marcus lingered, offering to help. Claire found herself watching him, noticing the way he interacted with the volunteers, the genuine kindness in his demeanor. It was as if he truly had changed. "Marcus," she said as he finished stacking chairs, "can we talk?" "Of course," he said, his expression turning serious. She led him outside where the cool night air was a welcome contrast to the warmth of the crowded hall. They stood in silence for a moment, the distant hum of traffic filling the gaps between them. "I don't know what to do with you," Claire admitted, her voice tinged with vulnerability. "You're not the same man I divorced, but I don't know if I can trust this version of you either." Marcus took a deep breath, his eyes searching hers. "I know I don't deserve your trust yet, but I'm not going anywhere, Claire. I'll keep proving myself for as long as it takes." "What if I can't forgive you?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Then I'll have to live with that," he said simply. "But I'll still be here, helping you in any way I can, because you deserve that, and so much more." Claire looked away, tears welling in her eyes. She wasn't ready to forgive him, but she couldn't deny the pull she felt toward him, the faint hope that maybe, just maybe, they could find their way back to each other. "I need time," she said finally. "You can have all the time you need," Marcus replied. "I'm not going anywhere." As they stood under the night sky, a tentative truce was formed. Claire wasn't ready to let Marcus back into her heart, but for the first time in years, she felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe redemption was possible. Maybe healing wasn't as far out of reach as she had thought. And maybe, just maybe, love could find its way back to them. Over the next few weeks, Marcus's presence at the community center became a constant. He showed up early to help with preparations for events and stayed late to clean up afterward. His dedication was evident, but Claire remained cautious. The walls she had built around her heart were strong, and she wasn't ready to let them down just yet. One afternoon, as Marcus was repainting a wall in the children's playroom, Claire entered with a tray of sandwiches and iced tea. She paused for a moment, watching him work. There was something oddly endearing about seeing the once polished billionaire covered in paint splatters. "Taking a break?" she asked, placing the tray on a nearby table. Marcus turned, smiling as he wiped his hands on a rag. "Am I being rewarded for my hard work?" "Consider it a gesture of thanks," she said, sitting down. "You've been helping out a lot." "I told you, I'm here for as long as you'll let me be," Marcus replied, joining her at the table. Claire handed him a sandwich, her eyes scanning his face. "Why did you do it, Marcus? Why did you test me?" He sighed, setting the sandwich down. "I was insecure, scared even. I thought you were too good to be true, and instead of appreciating you, I let my fears get the best of me. Disguising myself as a homeless man was my way of confirming my doubts, but all it did was show me how wrong I was. Claire looked at him, her expression softening slightly. You could have just talked to me. I know, he admitted, but I was too proud, and by the time I realized my mistake, it was too late. The sincerity in his voice made Claire's chest tighten. She wanted to believe him, to trust that he had changed, but the wounds of their past still lingered. Trust isn't easy to rebuild, Marcus, she said quietly. I know, he replied, but I'm willing to do whatever it takes. Their conversation was interrupted by the sound of children's laughter as a group of kids burst into the room, their energy filling the space. Marcus watched them with a small smile, then turned to Claire. They adore you, he said. You've built something incredible here. Claire's lips curved into a faint smile. They're the reason I keep going. As the children settled into their activities, Marcus returned to his painting, leaving Claire with her thoughts. She couldn't deny that his actions over the past few weeks had made an impact. He wasn't just saying the right things. He was showing her through his actions that he was serious about making amends. That evening, as Claire walked home, she found herself reflecting on their time together. She had seen glimpses of the man she had fallen in love with, the one who had once made her feel like she was the most important person in his world. But she had also seen his flaws, the weaknesses that had driven them apart. The question was, could she forgive him enough to give them another chance? The answer came unexpectedly a few days later. It was a rainy afternoon, and the community center was buzzing with activity as volunteers prepared for a food drive. Marcus had been out making deliveries, and Claire was busy organizing donations when a commotion broke out near the entrance. She hurried over to find Marcus standing there, drenched from head to toe, holding a young boy in his arms. I found him wandering the streets, Marcus explained, his voice laced with concern. He was lost and scared. The boy, no older than 5, clung to Marcus, his eyes wide with fear. Claire's heart clenched as she knelt down to the child's level. Hey there, she said gently. What's your name? Eli, the boy whispered. Eli, you're safe now, Claire assured him. We'll help you find your family. As Claire and Marcus worked together to comfort Eli and contact the authorities, Claire saw a different side of Marcus. The way he cared for the boy, the tenderness in his actions, was a stark contrast to the man she had once known. It was as if he had truly transformed. Later that evening, after Eli had been reunited with his parents, Claire and Marcus sat in the quiet of the empty center. The rain had stopped, and the world outside seemed peaceful. You surprised me today, Claire admitted, breaking the silence. How so? Marcus asked. You showed me that you're capable of more than I ever gave you credit for, she said. That you're not the man you used to be. Marcus looked at her, his expression earnest. I'm trying, Claire. For you, for us. I want to be the man you deserve. Claire's gaze met his, and for the first time in a long while, she felt the walls around her heart begin to crack. Maybe, just maybe, they could find their way back to each other, but she knew it wouldn't be easy. I'm not ready to forgive you completely, she said, her voice firm but not unkind. But I'm willing to see where this goes. Marcus nodded, a flicker of hope in his eyes. That's all I can ask for. As they sat together in the quiet of the night, the possibility of a new beginning lingered between them. It was fragile and uncertain, but it was there, a glimmer of hope in the midst of their shared pain. And for the first time in years, Claire allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, they could rewrite their story. The days that followed brought an air of cautious optimism between Marcus and Claire. Their conversations grew longer, their silences less strained, and the invisible wall that had separated them for so long seemed to shrink little by little. While their relationship was far from repaired, the foundation of trust they were beginning to rebuild felt steady. One sunny afternoon, Marcus arrived at the community center carrying a basket of baked goods. He'd taken to bringing small surprises whenever he visited, and though Claire pretended not to notice, the twinkle in her eye gave away her appreciation. What's the occasion today? She asked as he set the basket on the reception desk. Marcus grinned. No occasion, just thought the volunteers could use a treat. Claire raised an eyebrow. And the fact that it's my favorite bakery has nothing to do with it? Pure coincidence, Marcus replied with a wink, earning a rare laugh from her. As the afternoon progressed, Marcus helped with various tasks around the center, seamlessly integrating himself into the day-to-day operations. He was becoming a familiar face to the staff and volunteers, and even the children had warmed up to him, often running to greet him when he arrived. That evening, after the center had closed for the day, Marcus and Claire found themselves alone in the garden behind the building. It was a quiet, peaceful space filled with flowers and benches, a place Claire often retreated to when she needed a moment to herself. "I don't think I've ever thanked you for this place," Marcus said, gesturing to the garden. Claire looked at him, surprised. "Thank me. You're the one who donated the land." "But you brought it to life," he said. "You turned it into something beautiful." Claire's expression softened as she glanced around the garden. "I guess I just wanted to create a space where people could feel safe, where they could heal." "You've done more than that," Marcus said, his tone sincere. "You've built a community." Claire turned to him, her eyes searching his face. "Why are you really here, Marcus? Is it guilt? Regret?" "It's all of that," he admitted. "But it's also hope. Hope that I can make things right. Hope that we can find a way forward." Claire sighed, leaning against the wooden railing that framed the garden. "I don't know if I can ever forget what happened, Marcus. The lies, the betrayal. It's a lot to move past." "I don't expect you to forget," he said. "I just want the chance to prove that I'm not the same man I was, that I'm worth trusting again." Before Claire could respond, a soft voice interrupted them. "Ms. Claire?" It was one of the children from the center, a little girl named Lily. Claire crouched down to her level. "What is it, sweetheart?" Lily held out a small, crumpled piece of paper. "I drew this for you." Claire unfolded the paper to reveal a drawing of the garden, complete with flowers, benches, and a bright yellow sun. At the center of the drawing was Claire, holding hands with Marcus. "It's beautiful, Lily," Claire said, her voice catching slightly. "Do you like it, Mr. Marcus?" Lily asked, turning to him. Marcus knelt down, smiling warmly. "I love it. You're a very talented artist." Lily beamed before running off to join the other children. Claire watched her go, a mixture of emotions swirling in her chest. "She's right, you know," Marcus said softly. "We do make a good team." Claire turned to him, her eyes filled with a blend of hesitation and longing. "Maybe. But a team takes time, trust, and a lot of effort." "I'm here for all of it," Marcus said, "for as long as it takes." The next morning, Claire woke up to find a letter on her doorstep. It was written in Marcus's handwriting, the words carefully chosen. "Claire, there are no words that can erase the pain I've caused you, but I want you to know that I am committed to doing everything in my power to make amends. You deserve honesty, loyalty, and love, and I failed to give you that in the past. Being here, seeing you, has reminded me of the incredible person you are. You didn't let the pain I caused define you. You turned it into strength. You've inspired me to be better, to grow, and to face my flaws head on. I know actions speak louder than words, so I won't ask for your forgiveness. I'll earn it one step at a time. For now, I just want you to know that I see you, Claire, and I'm grateful for the second chance to be part of your life. Always, Marcus." Claire folded the letter, her hands trembling slightly. The sincerity in Marcus's words was undeniable, and for the first time, she felt a glimmer of hope that maybe, just maybe, they could find their way back to each other. As she headed to the community center, the letter tucked safely in her bag, Claire couldn't shake the feeling that her life was on the brink of something new. It was terrifying and exhilarating all at once, and though she didn't know what the future held, she knew one thing for certain. Marcus was no longer the man he used to be, and perhaps, in time, she could learn to trust him again. A week later, the community center was buzzing with excitement. A fundraising gala had been planned, and it was shaping up to be the biggest event the center had ever hosted. Claire had poured her heart into organizing every detail, determined to make it a success. Marcus had offered his help, and while she was hesitant at first, she had to admit that his connections and expertise were invaluable. As the day of the gala approached, Marcus noticed how Claire's dedication seemed to overshadow her well-being. She spent long hours at the center, skipping meals and running on little sleep. Though she tried to hide it, Marcus could see the exhaustion in her eyes. "You can't do everything alone," Marcus said one evening as they sorted through decorations in the event hall. "I'm fine," Claire replied, her tone brisk. "This gala is too important to mess up." "You're doing an incredible job, Claire," Marcus said gently. "But you need to take care of yourself, too." Claire paused, her shoulders sagging slightly. "This center means everything to me, Marcus. It's not just about the gala. It's about what it represents. If we can raise enough funds, we can expand our programs, help more people. And you'll do exactly that, Marcus said. But not if you're running on fumes. Let me take some of this off your plate. Claire hesitated, her pride battling with her exhaustion. Fine, but if you mess up the seating chart, it's on you. Marcus chuckled. Deal. The night of the gala arrived and the event hall was transformed into a dazzling spectacle. Strings of lights twinkled above, casting a warm glow over the elegantly decorated tables. Guests in formal attire mingled, the air filled with laughter and the clinking of glasses. Claire stood near the entrance, greeting guests with a polite smile. She wore a deep emerald gown that hugged her figure gracefully, her hair swept up in an elegant twist. Despite her composed exterior, she couldn't shake the nervous flutter in her stomach. This gala was a turning point for the center, and she desperately wanted it to succeed. Marcus approached her, his tailored tuxedo emphasizing his broad shoulders and confident demeanor. You look stunning, he said, his voice soft but sincere. Claire's cheeks flushed. Thank you. You don't look so bad yourself. Ready for your big speech? He asked. Not really, Claire admitted. Public speaking has never been my thing. You'll do great, Marcus said. Just speak from the heart. That's what everyone's here for. As the evening progressed, the guests settled into their seats, and the program began. Claire took the stage, her heart pounding in her chest. She glanced at Marcus, who gave her an encouraging nod from the front row. Good evening, everyone, Claire began, her voice trembling slightly. Thank you all for being here tonight. This community center started as a dream, a place where people could come together, find support, and rebuild their lives. What I didn't realize when I started this journey was how much it would give back to me. She paused, her gaze sweeping across the room. Every child who smiles because they feel safe. Every family that finds hope after hardship. That's what this center is about. And none of it would be possible without people like you. The audience erupted into applause, and Claire's confidence grew. She continued her speech, sharing heartfelt stories of the lives the center had touched, and outlining her vision for the future. By the time she finished, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. As Claire stepped off the stage, Marcus was the first to greet her. You were amazing, he said, his voice filled with pride. Thanks, Claire said, her cheeks still flushed from the applause. I just hope it was enough. It was more than enough, Marcus said, and now it's my turn. Before Claire could respond, Marcus stepped onto the stage. The room fell silent as he addressed the audience. Good evening, everyone. My name is Marcus Bennett, and I have the privilege of standing here tonight as a supporter of this incredible center. But my connection to this place goes deeper than that. It's personal. Marcus's gaze found Claire in the crowd, and he smiled softly. This center is the heart and soul of someone who has inspired me more than anyone else ever has. Claire Bennett, my ex-wife. Gasps rippled through the audience, but Marcus continued undeterred. Claire and I have been through our share of challenges, but if there's one thing I've learned, it's that her strength, compassion, and determination are unmatched. This center is a reflection of her, and I am honored to support her vision. He paused, his voice steady but filled with emotion. Tonight I want to do more than just support. I want to invest in the future of this center. I'm pledging $5 million to ensure that Claire's dream can reach even more people. The room erupted into applause, and Claire stood frozen in shock. She hadn't expected this, any of it. As Marcus stepped down from the stage, the guests surrounded him, praising his generosity and vision. But Marcus's eyes were fixed on Claire. When the crowd finally dispersed, Marcus approached her. I hope you're not mad, he said with a sheepish smile. Mad? Claire echoed, her voice shaking. Marcus, why would you do this? Because I believe in you, he said simply. And I believe in what you're doing. This is my way of making up for all the times I didn't support you the way I should have. Tears welled in Claire's eyes, but she blinked them back. You didn't have to do this, Marcus. The center would have been fine. I know, he said, but I wanted to, not just for the center, for you. Claire stared at him, her emotions swirling in a whirlwind of gratitude, confusion, and something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Thank you, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Marcus smiled, a flicker of relief in his eyes. You're welcome. As the gala continued, Claire couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted between them. The walls she'd built around her heart were still there, But for the first time in years, they didn't feel impenetrable, and as Marcus stayed by her side throughout the evening, she began to wonder if it was possible to let him in again, just a little. As the weeks unfolded after the gala, Claire found herself grappling with a whirlwind of emotions. The success of the event was undeniable. The community center had raised more than they ever dreamed of, thanks to Marcus's unprecedented donation and the outpouring of generosity from others. But with the success came a renewed presence of Marcus in her life, a presence she wasn't sure how to navigate. Marcus, true to his word, became an active supporter of the center. He worked closely with Claire and her team, offering not only financial backing but also strategic guidance to expand their programs. At first, Claire maintained a cautious distance, wary of the emotional complexities their renewed partnership might bring. Yet, as days turned into weeks, she couldn't ignore the genuine commitment Marcus displayed. One evening, as they reviewed plans for a new outreach initiative, Claire broke the silence. "You've been spending a lot of time here," she said, her tone neutral but laced with curiosity. Marcus looked up from the blueprints spread across the table. "I believe in what we're doing here," he said. "It feels good to be part of something meaningful." Claire arched an eyebrow. "Something tells me you're not just here for the center." Marcus hesitated for a moment, his gaze searching hers. "You're right," he admitted. "I'm here because of you, Claire." She froze, her heart skipping a beat. "Marcus, let me finish," he said gently. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, and I'm not here to ask for it, but being around you again, seeing the passion and strength you put into this place, it's reminded me of everything I took for granted. I don't expect us to go back to what we had, but I want you to know that I'm here for you. Whatever you need, I'll be here." Claire felt a lump rise in her throat. His words were unexpected, yet they resonated with a sincerity she hadn't seen in years. "That's a lot to take in," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I understand," Marcus said. "Take all the time you need." Despite her initial reservations, Claire found herself softening toward Marcus. His actions spoke louder than his words. He wasn't just supporting the center. He was actively rebuilding the trust he had once shattered. He showed up consistently, whether it was helping with administrative tasks, mentoring young volunteers, or simply listening to Claire's ideas and concerns. One afternoon, as they worked side by side in the center's office, Marcus broached a subject that had been weighing on his mind. "Claire, can I ask you something?" She glanced up from her laptop. "Sure. Why did you agree to help me that night?" he asked, referring to their first encounter when he'd approached her disguised as a homeless man. Claire leaned back in her chair, her expression thoughtful. "Honestly, I knew it was you from the start." Marcus's eyes widened. "You knew?" She nodded, a small smile playing on her lips. "You weren't as inconspicuous as you thought, and your eyes, I could never forget them." "Then why did you play along?" he asked, still processing her revelation. "I wanted to see what you were trying to prove," Claire said. "Part of me was curious, and part of me, I guess I wanted to remind you of what you lost." Marcus's expression softened. "You didn't just remind me, Claire. You changed me." They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of their shared history filling the room. For the first time, it felt like they were truly seeing each other, not as exes burdened by past mistakes, but as two people who had grown and evolved in their time apart. As the center flourished, so did the bond between Claire and Marcus. They found themselves spending more time together outside of work, grabbing coffee after long meetings, taking evening walks through the neighborhood, and sharing stories about their lives during the years they'd been apart. It was a slow, tentative process, but it felt natural. One evening, as they walked through the park near the center, Marcus stopped suddenly. "Claire, there's something I need to tell you." She turned to face him, her heart skipping a beat at the seriousness in his tone. "What is it?" "I never stopped loving you," he said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "I know I messed up. I know I hurt you in ways I can never undo. But if there's even the slightest chance that we could start over, I'm willing to do whatever it takes." Claire's breath caught in her throat. For so long she had convinced herself that she was better off without him, that their love had been irreparably broken. But standing here, hearing the raw vulnerability in his voice, she couldn't deny the feelings that still lingered in her heart. "I don't know if I can trust you again, Marcus," she admitted, her voice trembling. "It's not just about what you did. It's about everything we lost. I understand, he said, and I'm not asking for an answer right now. I just needed you to know how I feel. Claire nodded, her emotions swirling in a tumultuous mix of fear, hope, and longing. Thank you for being honest. As they continued their walk, the conversation shifted to lighter topics, but the weight of Marcus's confession lingered in the air. Claire couldn't ignore the spark of possibility that had been reignited, a spark that, for the first time in years, felt like it might be worth exploring. In the weeks following Marcus's heartfelt confession, Claire found herself at a crossroads. The walls she had built around her heart for years were slowly crumbling, replaced by the glimmer of a possibility she hadn't dared to entertain. A second chance. She spent countless nights reflecting on their shared history, the pain and joy that had defined their relationship, and the man Marcus had become. One evening, as she stood on the balcony of her apartment, gazing at the city lights, her phone buzzed with a message. It was from Marcus. Marcus, I'm hosting a dinner tomorrow evening at the center. It's a thank you for everyone's hard work, but I'd really love for you to be there. Claire hesitated for a moment before typing a response. Claire, I'll think about it. The following day, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Claire found herself standing outside the center. The warm glow of lights and the sound of laughter spilled into the night. Taking a deep breath, she stepped inside. The room was filled with familiar faces, volunteers, staff members, and even some of the families the center had helped. Marcus was at the center of it all, effortlessly charming as he thanked everyone for their contributions. When his eyes met Claire's, a smile spread across his face, and he excused himself from the group to approach her. I'm glad you came, he said, his voice sincere. I wasn't sure if I would, Claire admitted, her gaze steady. I know, he said, but it means a lot to me that you did. The evening unfolded in a whirlwind of heartfelt speeches, shared memories, and light-hearted moments. As the night drew to a close, Marcus stood at the front of the room, a glass of champagne in hand. Before we end the night, there's something I'd like to say, he began, his voice carrying a weight of emotion that silenced the room. This center has been more than just a project for me. It's been a journey of growth, redemption, and purpose, and none of it would have been possible without Claire. All eyes turned to her, and Claire felt her cheeks flush as Marcus continued. Claire, you've shown me what it means to truly care about others, to fight for what's right, and to never give up, even in the face of heartbreak. You've made me a better man, and for that, I'll always be grateful. As he raised his glass, the room erupted into applause. Claire's heart swelled with a mix of pride and gratitude. When the noise died down, Marcus approached her, his expression earnest. Can we talk? He asked. Claire nodded, and they stepped outside into the cool night air. The city skyline stretched before them, a breathtaking backdrop to the moment that was about to unfold. I meant every word I said in there, Marcus began. But there's one thing I didn't mention, something I've been waiting for the right moment to say. Claire's breath hitched as he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Her heart raced as he opened it to reveal a simple yet elegant diamond ring. Claire, he said, dropping to one knee, I know I don't deserve a second chance, but I want to spend the rest of my life making it up to you. You're the love of my life, and I don't want to waste another moment without you. Will you marry me? Tears welled in Claire's eyes as she looked at the man before her. She thought about the journey they had been on, the pain they had endured, and the love that still lingered between them. In that moment, all the doubts and fears that had held her back seemed to fade away. Yes, she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. Yes, I'll marry you. Marcus's face broke into a radiant smile as he slipped the ring onto her finger. Rising to his feet, he pulled her into a tight embrace, and the crowd inside the center erupted into cheers as they witnessed the heartfelt proposal. The following months were a whirlwind of planning, not just for their wedding but for the future of the center. Together, Claire and Marcus expanded its programs, reaching even more people in need. Their relationship grew stronger with each passing day, built on a foundation of trust, understanding, and mutual respect. When their wedding day arrived, it was a celebration of love, resilience, and second chances. Held at the center, the venue was transformed into a breathtaking setting, adorned with flowers and fairy lights. Surrounded by friends, family, and the community they had built together, Claire and Marcus exchanged vows that reflected the depth of their journey. You are my past, my present, and my future, Marcus said, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. "I promise to cherish you, to honor you, and to never take you for granted again." "And you are my greatest challenge and my greatest joy," Claire responded, her voice filled with conviction. "I promise to love you for who you are and for the man you've become." As they sealed their vows with a kiss, the crowd erupted into applause, and Claire and Marcus knew they had finally found their way back to each other. In the years that followed, their love story became an inspiration to many. The center continued to thrive, and their bond only grew stronger with time. They proved that even in the face of betrayal and heartache, love could prevail, if nurtured with honesty, forgiveness, and unwavering dedication. As they stood hand in hand on the balcony of their new home, watching the sunset paint the sky with hues of gold and crimson, Claire turned to Marcus with a smile. "We made it," she said softly. "We did," he replied, pulling her close, "and I wouldn't change a single moment of it." Together they looked out at the world before them, ready to face whatever the future held, secure in the knowledge that they had already overcome the hardest battles of all, hardest battles of all, hardest battles of all.